long time, no record. I'm gonna put out a video. We're going to be moving on to 1.15.2. Don't worry though, every tutorial previous to this that I made for 1.14.4 is exactly the same stuff for 1.15.2. So first we're going to talk about upgrading from 1.14.4 to 1.15.2. It's very easy. All you need to do is change this line right here under the dependencies tab in the build.gradle file to be 1.15.2- and then whatever the Forge version you're working with. Right now this is the latest version that's out for 1.15.2. The next thing you'll have to do is change your mappings channel. You can just go out and change it to this. Don't worry about it saying 1.15.1. That's just what MCP has decided to release on. And the next thing that you'll have to do is very simply go into your resources and open your mods.toml. Change the number from 28 to 31 here and here, and change this to 1.15.2. That simple. Then, just like in the first episode of this series where we set up our workspace, you need to run Gradelu Eclipse and potentially Gradelu gen Eclipse runs via the command prompt. The alternative way to do this is to just simply follow the first tutorial episode, and instead of doing the 1.14.4 MDK, do the 1.15.2 MDK, and then very simply all you have to do is delete the source file that it has and copy over your new one. That's simple. Alright, into the actual code of today's episode. We're going to be talking about the methods in the item class. So I've gone ahead and, well, I've gone ahead and changed this from new item to new tutorial item. And I made a new class called tutorial item. I put it in the items subpackage. And I added a bunch of methods that are in the item class, overrode them, and gave them a function. Let's explore what I did. So, first thing is if you right click a stone block, it'll change it into endstone. If you right click endstone, it'll change it into cobblestone. And if you right click cobblestone, it does nothing. Now what you'll notice is that if you hold right click and release, it shoots an arrow like a bow. The next thing is what happens if we hold down right click for about 5 seconds. Use duration has finished. That is another method. So only when you release right click within the use duration does it fire an arrow. Next thing is you'll notice that it spawns lightning on the ground. And it'll do this within 32 blocks. So it won't go all the way over there. It'll shoot arrows instead. The next thing is, if I go up here and ray trace onto the pig, it will strike it with lightning. Oh, sorry about that. And then the pig does indeed turn into a pigman. And then the same thing for the creeper. It turns into a charged creeper. Now, another thing. What happens if we right click on leaves? Oh, it works like a flint and steel. Alright, what about spruce leaves? Oh, nope, it doesn't work for spruce leaves. Alright, now let's go look at the code, and I'll break all this down. So in here, we will cover the turning stone into end stone first. there is a function or a method called onItemUseFirst. Called when the player right-clicks a block before block #onActivated is called and before item is called. If the action result type that is returned is not pass, it will not run block onActivated or item So if we return success or fail, then it will not run these two methods later down the execution line. Now, first, what we do is we get the block, well, we get the world from this item use context, then we get a block state from the world at the position within the context, which is the position that you have right-clicked on in the world. Then I get the block from that block state. Store it. If the block is blocks.stone, so if it's just the normal stone block, then I context.getWorld, and then I set a block state at the position that we right-clicked to blocks.endstone's default state. Then I make sure to return success so these two don't get called. If, however, we did not right-click on a stone block, I just return whatever the super method was going to do, which is just a pass, I believe. So then the next thing is onItemUse. So onItemUse is called after block #onBlockActivated is called, and of course after this one is called. And it only calls this one if this isn't used by the block, or under whatever circumstances it has decided, I'll just pass it off onto the item. So we do basically the exact same thing we did up here in onItemUseFirst. Get the block that we're pointing at. If it's an endstone block, I make it a cobblestone block, and then return success. Otherwise, I just return whatever it would return, which would be pass. Down here, I have a helper method that I've copied from somewhere else in the Minecraft codebase, and then renamed some stuff and made it less obfuscated. So what this does is it ray traces through the world from the player's eyes to a distance of 32 blocks in the direction they're facing. We don't need to worry about any of the cool stuff. This isn't an item method. So moving on, this is the method that we use that one in. This is called when the player right-clicks anywhere not on a block. Right? So right here, this line, this is an important line. This checks to see if we are on the logical server. Now, I haven't talked about sides yet, but I'm going to do it real quickly here. There are technically two different servers as a concept and two different clients as a concept. So we have to specifically say whether we're talking about the dedicated server, which is the one that it has a specific jar file and it hosts a public server, or private server, I guess, for more people to play together. Then there's the logical server. The logical server is what handles all of the logic that we should not trust the client with. This is where all of the game logic happens. Then there's the dedicated client, which means the client that you play on. It means this thing right here. This is the dedicated client. Then there's the logical client, and this is the thing that handles all the rendering and playing of audio. It does all of the resource kind of stuff. And then these two communicate and make the game happen. Alright? So this makes sure we are on the logical server, not we are on the dedicated server. Very separate things. So we get the stack for use, the item stack that the player is holding for later use, and then we use our helper function to ray trace into the world and get a ray trace result. Now we're going to do two things. First, we're going to check, was it a block ray trace result? Did our ray trace collide with a block? Sorry about that, that was my phone. Okay. Then we get the position of the block that we ray traced into. Then we get whatever block is in the world at that position. And then we check, are we a grass block? And then if we are, we check if we are a server world, which is just a secondary check for this, really. And then we add a lightning bolt and give it a new lightning bolt entity at the center of the block. And then we make sure that we return a success. If our block, however, is an oak leaves block, I copied and pasted some code from the flint and steel item class. But what it does is it offsets by the face that our ray trace collided with. So if it collided with the north, it's going to go one more block north. If we collided at the south, it's going to go one more block south. I play a sound in the world, which is the item flint and steel use sound. Then I ask the fire block for its state at the fire position. And then I set the fire block in the world. And make sure to return a success. Now, the next thing, if we ray trace an entity, right? So if result is an instance of entity ray trace result, then I get the entity. I once again check if we're a server world. I get the Vec3D entity pause. And then I make sure to add a lightning bolt to the server world. And then I also make sure to return a success. Now, if any of those three returns didn't happen, I set this hand as the active hand, which is useful in another method later. Finally, this one's pretty simple. This just basically it returns an enum for what animation the item should use when it's being held down, if any at all. So there's the block, which is the shield animation, the bow, which is the drawback animation that you saw, the crossbow is the loading animation, the drink is the drinking a potion animation or water bottle, eat is the eating animation, none is obviously we don't have one, and spear is for the trident. And then right here we have the get use duration. So this returns the amount of ticks the item can be used for. 100 ticks is 5 seconds. There are 20 ticks in 1 second in Minecraft. The next method is on item use finish. What this means is whenever this amount of time has passed, call this method. So very simply here what we do is, are we on the server or are we on the logical server? Is this living entity a player entity? And if it is, send a status message to the player called that has use duration has finished in it. And the status message is that little pop-up above your hotbar that's used for things like right-clicking in a bed when it tells you you can't sleep here because there's too many mobs around, or you can only sleep at night or during a thunderstorm. And then I make sure to return the super, because I'm not really doing anything here, so I can just return the super. Now, this is also a very useful one. This is called when you release the use button, which is typically the right mouse button, when it is still in a use duration, when it is still in a using state. This is used to shoot an arrow. So once again, if we're on the logical server, make an arrow entity, call arrow.shoot, which gives it its velocity at the beginning, and then make sure to add the entity to the world. Oh, and I guess there's also one thing I forgot to show you in game, but let's go over the code since we're already here. The add information method lets you add string text or iText components to the tooltip of an item. So very basically here, if we are in the advanced tooltip mode, which can be enabled by pressing F3 and H on your keyboard while in game, I add a string text component, which is just a simple string text component. And I say you are in advanced tooltip mode. If we are not in the advanced tooltip mode, this is the default tooltip, is what I put in the tooltip. Now, these two right here are pretty useful. If you have shift down, I add a tooltip that says you are holding shift down. Now, if you have control down is another useful one. I do you are holding control down. Let's see that in action, because I didn't show it earlier. This is the default tooltip. Holding shift, you are holding shift down. Holding control, you are holding control down. Holding both shift and control displays them both here. And if I press F3 and H, you'll see advanced tooltips are shown, and it has changed. You are in advanced tooltip mode, and these still work. Alright. That was probably the most useful item, or the basic useful item methods that you are probably going to use the most. Thank you for watching. I'm going to try to do tutorial episodes like this a bit more regularly now. And I was thinking about doing like actual programming, not tutorials, but like trying to teach the basics of programming. I don't know if I'm going to go through on that part, but if I do, hopefully people will watch. Thank you for watching. Till next time.